every grid is 50 centimeters. So the whole system is organized with 50 centimeters. Basically, it's a grid of 50 centimeters with this logic. So this is very interesting, and also there is a recurrent angle of 67.5 degrees that resumes the geometry of this element. So these are some key aspects that we wanted to put into our understanding, because we're using this to design as well. Because these are, we call it in Spanish estructura de campo, which means field structure, which help us to organize things. They were really clever. I mean, all of this it came from observation of nature, right? I just wanted to put something into the table that I think here is so important. We don't need to fake. We don't need to cover things, to pretend something. Just the materials, just the simple materials like wood, like the fabric, like the tent with the leaves. That's good enough to represent something unique and honest. In this case, the building, you can tell that you have a structure and they cover with different materials and they have a lot of finishes. So it's a lot of layers. And at the end, you can do something similar with less materials. So that's something that is very important to consider. And also, this is Sam here. He's faking that he's sitting. He's not sitting. He's faking because there's no. Usually, these ancient temples and buildings, they have something in the wall that you can sit outside. Right. And this building didn't have it at all. So it's important also to understand that the building has to provoke interaction with the users inside and the outside. So that's important to consider as well. Some other references,
as maybe one strategy for organizing elements, would be have 6 light wells inside of the space, and this idea would be to be able to bring light into the interior of the building so that even the programs that are within the interior of the building can have natural daylight even at the lower level in the cultural center. Another aspect of why we think that these vertical cuts through the building are so important is because your entire ground floor is allocated for parking. But in discussion, we were trying to understand how can that be useful as a public space, or even primarily function as a space of assembly or space of events and activity. Even though by code it must be parking, how can we make it a space that's actually very dignified and a place you want to be when there are no cars there at all? It can be a meaningfully contributive part of the space. So here in blue, these would be like the light wells, which could possibly even have the potential.
I think just said the light well មានប្រហោងតាមនេះណាពើភ្លឺគេហៅប្រហោងអមានភ្លើងបាទ Okay.
And then moving up through the building, what we were thinking is one way in this iteration is thinking of kind of inverting what Mike had talked about with the circulation, where visitors to the museum can come in, visit the exhibition space to see the museum, come to this memorial hall to see the sacred space, or be a part of the multi-purpose room if there are any public events. But all of that being accessible through a daylit corridor that circumnavigates the building and allows access into all of the programs. In this second floor, the idea would be to put the temple in a central position, surrounded by these 4 light wells, and having an outdoor court where when you come up from the ground floor on like a main axial staircase, you could walk all the way up from the street as a visitor into this court, across outdoors and into the temple through one main gate. So in this way, it's kind of flipping the ground floor where we had the very public open space and the cultural center floor where you had the circumnavigating corridor. In this space, you have all the access from the center going out. And on the outside of the building, you have meditation rooms, or you have the administrative offices or the monks' quarters on the outside of the building. So just to really emphasize what that is, here's a couple of axonometrics that explain that. So this cutting through this court, imagining that you would have these kind of corridors with light on either side, some light and a tree in the center, and then the program wrapping around these courts with the temple beyond, or the main temple space. And this is really a key thing. We have such an exotic and extraordinary gift today that it's a beautiful sunny day and we're sitting out underneath this veranda, because if you look up and you see the shadow of all these leaves and of the trees, this is a really magical ornament. This itself adorns the entire space with the light and the color and the shadow and the constant movement. It's almost transcendent. And so in this sketch, the idea would be that if these light wells face the four corners of the central temple where the Buddha sits, you could have the shadow and light of the trees on all sides of the Buddha, all seasons, even without the trees with the leaves that still have the shadows, kind of framing the most important space of your temple. And so this central atrium would kind of really be the heart of the building, up above the cultural center on this second. We're really trying to interpret in this version how to understand the kind of courtyard complex as demonstrated in like Prey Khan, but on a very micro scale for the size of your temple, right? Because yours is not an expansive citywide, city-sized building as Prey Khan was. Instead, it's the community that's like one house. And then with these small light wells, it almost makes these courts around which all the programs of the meditation space, the library, the offices, the meeting rooms, all can be arranged around these little moments of nature, with the central jewel of the temple being the actual sanctuary in the very middle.
Moving from that programmatic diagrams, this is more like an architectural approximation of the project. So as John mentioned, well, first of all, here is our geometry is here in order to regulate the access. Then we have this notion of having the 6 light wells. In this case, in the first floor, we have this main space, the cultural center, and then the part of all the activity happens with the stage. So it's more like a wide open space with these 2 corridors. And then in the second floor, the light wells, they became a bit bigger. So they have, if you enter to this space, you have a main corridor that has the 2 main spaces for the monks. And then you have the main part where Buddha is, and then you have also these clusters here on the side for meditation and offices, and so it's almost like the same logic. So in this case, the difference is that we kept these corridors in that way. We also talk about the importance of the ground floor. What we were trying to put in this diagram is that if we have the light wells here, even in the ground floor, you can have where the light arises into the ground floor, you can develop benches. This is just a diagram to show that when you have the light coming from above, you can sit, so this generates more like a feeling of a park. And also you can have nature to go inside underneath the building. So there are ways to incorporate nature underneath the building, which we thought that was very important as well.
Michael, back want to add to so on the green light, we're looking at the parking lot, the material, the true grit that tied into that to the bench. At the same time, it doesn't damage. You could see that you could walk through there, but it's actually green, but it's true grit. It could be part of that.
It could be a hybrid between grass, the true grit, and then intentional concrete. So we have different elements like to make it less the impact on the land.
Right.
This is the concept of the light wells in this other iteration. So we have the openings on the roofs, and these interconnect with the light wells until the ground floor. So this is a very thing that we wanted to celebrate. Even from the pinnacle, you can have openings around, and the light can go directly into the Buddha statue. So you can have the Buddha day lit in the center of the space. Also, another thing that we thought it was very important is the concrete, and then you have the wooden structure. You have these different frames that are repetitive in order to incorporate the building, right? Then the notion of the corridor, how these corridors, they articulate the rest of the spaces, and these are some images about how we're gonna work in this sequence of spaces that moves along the different programs of the building. We thought this part is very important. We don't want to overdo the building, but maybe what we can propose is to have, with that geometry that we have been analyzing from the sacred geometry, we can propose a scheme, like a envelope for the building that will have different ways of emphasizing. These are the columns, so you have other secondary columns of wood, but you have different densities. So they open it up when you're in the temple or in the main part of the cultural center, and they close where you have meditation, so you have more privacy. So they open and close, and each column will have like this type of doors that they open and close. Of course, the doors, they're going to be from different sizes. If you see it from the floor plan, it will look like this. What is important from this is that these doors, they become panels. So we can CNC these panels in steel, we can do it in glass, we can do it in different materials with the history of the Cambodian culture.
Therefore,
so it's like a facade, like a cultural facade in the building. You can open it and close it.
So CNC is a machine that cut is a cut bình, cut រូបដែកឬកាត់ឈើណាប៉ុន្តែវាមានក្បាច់ខ្មែរក្នុងនឹងដែរ ចឹង we looking at មិនបាច់ចាំប្រើចំណាក់ច្រើនប៉ុន្តែឲ្យអ្នកឆ្លាក់បើយើងមិនបាច់ចាំឆ្លាក់ឯងយើងឆ្លាក់ជាគ្រឿងម៉ាស៊ីនគេហៅថាកាត់វាបណ្ដោយ
Like engraved, yeah.
Great, yeah.
And we were talking with Sam today about also this narrative could be also not even from this geometry, but also from a historic moment.
I could talk a little bit about this.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, hold. Can you photograph? Just a little bit of this. Reason that my. ចឹងនៅក្នុង I'll say it in Khmer but in feel so ខ្ញុំកណា feel that សង្គមខ្មែរយើងមានប្រវត្តិសាស្ត្រល្អឬក៏ប្រសើរមួយនៅក្នុង history របស់យើងណាប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនដែលមានគេហៅថាយើងធ្លាប់នៅអង្គរបាយ័នយើងមាន particularly in Bayon យើងមាន history របស់យើងណាខ្ញុំជឿថាបើសិនជាយើងមានអ្វីមួយជាសំខាន់តែថាជាប្រវត្តិរូបរបស់ខ្មែរយើងពីដើមចំនួនដែលយើងកសាងអង្គរវត្តរងរឿងចំនួនដែលខ្មែរយើងជាទេសភាពខ្លះនៅក្នុងពីដើមខ្មែរធ្វើណាចំនួនបារាំង took over and ចំនួនដែលយើង become independent and part of that and then right now ចំនួនដែលយើងជួបពីខ្លួនមកពីស្រុកខ្មែរមកដល់ស្រុកអាមេរិកនេះហើយយើងមាន history ប្រាប់ទេហើយពីស្រុកអាមេរិកទៅមកតែយើងមាន history ប្រាប់និយាយជួយទេអញ្ចឹងយើងអាចធ្វើជាអ្វីមួយដែលជួយនៅក្នុងសង្គមយើងរបស់យើងដែរអញ្ចឹង it's part of the history the journey so I just want to add that thank you
Sure, no, of course. And this is a great opportunity to do something more contemporary and alternative to express the culture and celebrate the culture, and how the facade becomes a very important element in the outside of the building but also in the inside, and will help us to open it up for daylight, for even if this is engraved but not also engraved, could be if you do it in CNC with laser cutters or water cutters, you will have a hole actually, so light can pass through these things. Yeah, crafting in that way. And this is just an image. It's very, very preliminary. Don't take it as a design, but this is more or less like what something may look like. If you have all these different panels, having these possibilities to open and close, and having these apertures on the roof, this celebrates also the geometry that we have been talking about, and having this element that can incorporate daylight into the Buddha in the main part of the temple. So there are some images that we're going to put in the next revision that you're going to see Buddha, how it's being celebrated with light, enlightenment. And maybe, I mean, this model is not even finished. It's on a process model, but maybe these elements, they don't have to be close. Maybe it's just the gesture of the structure that shows the other part of the roof, and that's it. We don't need to close it. Who knows? I mean, this is just part of a first attempt. So I believe this is it from our side.